The trade war has brought many challenges to the US-China business relationship, and the goal of today's conference is to help Hoosier and Chinese businesses learn more about these challenges and opportunities in the current business climate so they can mitigate risk and cultivate future business success. So our first presentation will focus on Chinese policy, including the Chinese blocking statute. So we're delighted to welcome Mr. Yi-Tiang Li, or Mr. Li, partner at Faegre Drinker, to the conference. So welcome, Mr. Li.
Thank you, Corinne. And when we talk about China and US business relationship, as Corinne pointed out, it really creates lots of benefits and opportunities for both countries, but we also face all kinds of challenge. And today we talk about one of the challenge, which is the Chinese blocking statutes. And the Chinese blocking statutes, it reminds me a very famous slogan for those people who grew up in China during the Cultural Revolution. And that's Chairman Mao about 100 years ago has mentioned how to, he said who are our enemies, who are our friends? This question is the most important question for revolution. And that slogan during the Cultural Revolution is basically show up everywhere. And for us, for those grew up in China, that's the slogan we are taught how to identify who are anti-revolutions and who are the revolutionary, and then treat those people differently. And I think that kinds of philosophy has very deep impact in today's China society. And when we talk about those legal development, political developments, especially in dealing with the relationship with other countries, and it reminds me of this famous slogan. And when we talk about from the legal side, especially in terms of the recent years development in terms of extraterritorial application of law, Chinese law, and from blocking statutes to cybersecurity and personal information protection laws. It really has the imprints of the Chairman Mao's philosophy here. Now, these development sometimes it could be pretty intimidating, and but of course it really comes to the relationship, the political relationship between China and in particular US. And especially when we are dealing with some issues that Chinese government view that as it touches the Chinese sovereignty, touch the red line that of the Chinese government, for example, in connection with Taiwan, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong, human rights, all those type of issues. So in the past 2 years, so let's just give you a few examples. October 2020, we have the sanctions against several US defense companies that relating to arms sales to Taiwan. That's nothing new. That's always happened in the past. But this year, the Chinese government imposed sanctions against 28 former US government officials for violating Chinese sovereignty in connection with their roles or statements on issues relating to Taiwan, and also their comments about COVID. That's really something, a huge new development that China has never done that in the past. March this year, sanctions against 10 EU individuals, 9 UK individuals, AEU and UK entities, including a chamber, a law firm, for spreading lies about Xinjiang. And the sanctions include prohibiting individuals and their immediate family members from traveling to China, including Hong Kong. And also, sanctions also include in seizing assets in China and prohibiting Chinese individuals and entities from doing business with those sanctioned target. Those type of sanctions, I think China probably borrowed the U.S. model and basically also want to exercise its extraterritorial authority to sanction foreign companies and individuals. And social media. If you look at the social media, whenever it comes to those issues that has been that being viewed by Chinese government as a red line, you will see that if a company make any statement, public statements, and then you could see the social media outcry and then boycotts, and that if you look at the example like H&M, Nike, and other major brands, they all got into that trouble when they expressed concern in public about the alleged forced labor in Xinjiang. So this is something real. It's not just in theory. And from legal perspective, the new development is that the China issued several, basically three major laws and regulations in dealing with like laws to give China the authority and power to penalize those basic both. I think it's mainly the foreign targets if they cross the red line. So that include putting them on the unreliable entity list, and also have the blocking statutes that to prohibit both foreign companies and Chinese companies and individuals from cooperating with the sanctions imposed by foreign government in connection with trade with third countries. It also includes the new anti-sanction laws that passed by the People's Congress in June this year. So unlike the EU blocking statute, which mainly targets EU individuals and entities, these three laws and regulations actually are mainly targeted at foreign individuals and entities, and forcing them to make a choice when they face the conflicting compliance obligations. And these three laws and regulations, they are actually they're working together with different focus. The first one, the unreliable entity list, it deal with that activities that Chinese government view that is endangering China's sovereignty, security, or development interest. That's one type. And second is that if anyone is suspending or terminating transactions with the Chinese individuals or entities, or they're taking discriminative actions against Chinese individuals or entities, that if you comply with the whatever sanction orders of the U.S. government to terminate your or suspend your business with Chinese individuals or entities, you could be, if it's seriously enough, especially if those viewed by Chinese government as political related, then you could be put onto the unreliable entity list. And last year, HSBC was really concerned that it could be put on the unreliable entity list in connection with Huawei episode, and the same for FedEx. Blocking statutes. Blocking statute is mainly dealing with that the sanctions relating to the trades, the foreign sanctions relating to trade with third countries like Iran, Russia, and Cuba, those type of countries. And the target is that anyone, that including Chinese companies or individuals, and foreign companies, if they have done something to comply with foreign sanction, by doing so, they infringe the legitimate interests of Chinese company individuals, that they could be subject to the penalties imposed by Chinese government. And the also any Chinese individuals, organizations or companies that fail to report a foreign sanctions that are applicable to them to the Chinese regulatory authority, they will also be subject to the penalties imposed by Chinese government. And then we come to the anti-sanction laws, and that really is very, very broad. It's anyone, including Chinese and foreign individuals, organizations, or entities, if they participate in the formulation, decision-making, or implementations of discriminatory restrictive measures of foreign government against Chinese individuals, organizations, to interfere with the internal affairs of China. So it's really anything relating to internal affairs of China. That's what we said in the red line. That you would be penalized. The formulation and decision making, that's a very broad term. So if, for example, you some company, the CEO, or make any testimony in the Congress, and later the Congress or the U.S. government, if you attend some hearings, and then the government, the U.S. government impose some sanction, and you, because you participate in the hearing process, make some testimony, depending what you said, you could be penalized. Okay. And the implementation, that's very, very broad. So if you basically follow that U.S. government sanctions, and to basically just to obey the order to comply with your obligation, you could be viewed as you're implementing that kinds of discriminatory restrictive measures. So you could be penalized. And the penalties imposed by those regulations are very severe. It really ranging from prohibiting you to enter into China, or have any kinds of trading with your Chinese counterparts, and also in terms of your employees' work permit in China could be revoked. You could be also deported out of China. So we have those. If you look at the penalties list here, it's very broad. Your assets in China under the sanctions, the anti-sanctions law, it could be seized and basically taken away by Chinese government. And that penalty is not just to yourself. It both, if you're individual, it spans to your spouse, your relative, close relatives, and if your company or organization, then the senior management personnel, actual control person, or it's not the company or entity, it's itself. It's much broader than that. Now, for more than that, in addition to the penalties imposed by the Chinese government, you also face the risk of that Chinese individuals, those business counterparts, they could file lawsuits in Chinese courts against you, and also if there's a ruling outside of China that the Chinese that you got benefits, so that the term benefit is very vague. Then the Chinese individual organizations or entities, they could also file lawsuits against you. And the benefits, because it's such a vague terms, that could mean it's not just the monetary compensation you receive from that either court judgments or rulings, arbitration rulings. Even, for example, if you are allowed to terminate a contract in order to comply your obligations to the U.S. law to avoid any penalties, would that be viewed as benefits? It could be. So anyway, those terms in those regulations are very vague and broad, and really is give the Chinese authority the discretionary power to decide how to deal with your situation. And also the mechanism here, it really, from legal perspective, it creates lots of trouble because you're dealing with most of many contracts you sign with your Chinese business partner. You provide the arbitration clause. Now, strictly speaking, any disputes in connection with your performing your contract, they're supposed to follow the arbitration procedure. But right now, the Chinese, your Chinese counterpart has the legal rights, has statutory right to file lawsuit in China under the blocking statutes or anti-sanction laws. And so basically, there's a clear conflict when they try to exercise their statutory right and whatever written in the contract about the dispute resolution, how to deal with that issue. It's that would be a huge mess. So what's the I think when we talk about here, the message, what's the message here from Chinese government passing those laws and regulations? I think that a couple points. One, I think it reflects that the Chinese government's deep distrust toward the US and the other Western world. So I think that's a reason that it wants to have the tool to retaliate if the U.S. government, in particular, wants to take any actions, and that viewed by Chinese government as the crossing the red line, that and if any U.S. companies or individuals, if you take any stand to support U.S. government's position, then the Chinese government will retaliate you for your standing. And also, I think that it also shows that the Chinese government believes that it has the power and leverage to force foreign companies to choose not to follow the sanctions or other compliance order imposed by the U.S. government. Because if they don't have that kinds of confidence, I just can't imagine why you want to have these laws and regulations targeting foreign companies, individuals, unless you believe that you have the power and leverage to force them not to obey the laws of their home jurisdictions. Now, my concern is that these laws and regulations, and it could be counterproductive for the Chinese government, because I, 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 I think it would be very difficult when it really comes to the times that the relationships heading south. You try to expect those U.S. companies and individuals to ignore the U.S. The legal requirement. I think that that's impossible. But it really is. I think that kinds of the approach, in my view, it really will scare foreign investment away. It's really not in the best interest of Chinese government. Um, so in terms of how we could do, uh, I think that under the legal framework is really at the end of the day, if you have investment in China, if you have business with your Chinese partner, at the end of the day, it really it depends on Chinese governments, in terms of how they want to, exercise their discretion in determining how to deal with your standings if you decide to comply with the U.S. sanctions laws. So in China, especially, I think if it's trade related, especially relating to the third countries, that would be, in my view, is a little bit easier comparing with any issues, sanctions orders relating to national sovereignty or security interests in from Chinese perspective. In that case, I think it's just be diplomatic in your discussions with your Chinese partners about those conflicts, and then discuss with them how to navigate to solve those problems and in a conflicting legal environment, and be flexible. And because laws, policies change all the time, but from companies' perspective, I try to avoid making any unnecessary public statements, and especially in dealing with the social media backlash in China. That would be a really a top priority for you to think about, and you need to have a plan in crisis plan in hand to deal with that kinds of potential risk. And also show your good faith compliance effort to apply for like those license in the US or exemptions in China. Then to show this is really something that's beyond your control. In terms of visa, I don't have news for everybody. I think that and also, if you want to know some details about that, you could check this up our website, our firm's website. We just had a webinar a couple of weeks ago talking about this issue. You could find out more information there. My personal view is that I think that the restrictions, COVID-related travel restriction, I don't think China is going to open the door to foreign visitors in the foreseeable future. Definitely not before the Winter Olympic, and it's more likely around the 20th Congress of the Communist Party in 2022. Because this, I think, is not just a COVID-related issue. I think it's probably the policy, the Chinese government's policy in terms of massive lockdown and zero tolerance. That's a way, the direction that the Chinese government want to show to the world, and also Chinese people, that the Chinese system is more efficient and better than other systems of the world. And so I think if you want them to say, okay, to open the door, and I think that would be very difficult unless the COVID virus naturally, winding down and that time that the Chinese government may consider open the door. So that's my presentation. Any questions? I think we have a few minutes left.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lee. One of the things that we always practice here at ACSI is that it's important for both Hoosier businesses and Chinese businesses to do their homework. So we thank you very much for taking the time to expertly and eloquently discuss some of those issues. So this is the Q&A portion of the event. So again, please feel free to drop in any questions that you have either in the chat feature or in the Q&A feature. The first one that has been submitted, it says, how likely do you think it would be for China to sanction US companies which require their trading partners in China to comply with US export controls and trade sanctions? Is this something small to medium-sized US companies should be worried about?
So yeah, this is an excellent question. So the whole point here, everything is discretionary, and it could be if you are major players that like Apple, all those kinds of company that and of course that would be the first target. And if you are a small or medium company, the issue is whether the sanction orders that relates to its more political issue or just the third country related trading issue, and I think that the likelihood is small, but remember, sometimes Chinese government, they just wants to take action. If you are too big, you have and have lots of investment in China, the Chinese government may be reluctant, maybe more cautious to do anything. But if you are a small player, but somehow your actions or your statements trigger the attention, alert the Chinese government. For small player, it's more easier to deal with. Right. So I think it really depends on the situation and how you react in that process.
Thank you. We have another question. What types of risks do these new laws create for Chinese subsidiaries of US companies?
Oh, that's very easy. They basically present to those laws and regulation. The relationship interactions between your investment in China, the FIEs, for invested enterprise, and the parent entity could be cut off if you put in on the unreliable entity list. If you under the anti-sanctions law, the Chinese government basically could seize your assets in China, which includes your ownership to your China investment and also your other assets. For example, if you have patents or trademarks registered in China, and if there's the basically Chinese government could seize your assets in China. If there's a lawsuits against you or penalties against you and you refuse to pay, they could impose judicial liens and to auction out your assets in China.
Wonderful. So this is a little bit more of gazing into the crystal ball type of question, but do you foresee any other policy priorities that the Chinese government may look to implement in the next few years that might impact US business?
Well, there are quite a lot. Actually, right now, there's one, it's going to have very significant impacts on US. The China just passed the Personal Information Protection Law, which will take effect in a few days on November 1st. And that law is very, it's probably is one of the most restrictive personal information, data privacy law in the whole world, and it shows that China is asserting its data sovereignty and really wants to control the data flow. That has a I have written a legal update on that subject, and that subject is that, as I said, when you're looking at all those legal development together, it seems like that China actually is heading to a direction. It wants to be a different part of the world, and it really create lots of burden for foreign company to conduct business in China, and for the sake of national security or sovereignty. So it's a directions I'm not sure whether it's in Chinese government's best interest, but that is heading.
All right. We have another question here from Dr. Craig Seidelson. Do you think China's sanctions are designed to be used in response to US sanctions, to the extent sanctions are exercised every time the US government is exercised?
Of course, that's the I think the one of the main reasons. The and I think that but the problem is when you put in this as if you look at the provision of these laws and regulation, it was so broad, and it's basically it makes people concerned that this is the for like most of the company, they just want to do business with China, and they really feel the threat because it is so broad and vague, and their interest in China could be jeopardized.
I have another question here. What lessons should U.S. companies learn from H&M and other companies which have made public statements about China issues?
That's really a tough question because I mean the Chinese government, I think therefore from their perspective is business is just business. Don't get involved in politics. But that's in the real world is very difficult to keep that black and white, and so I think it really comes to the case by case situation. When you're having a like U.S. sanctions or others government compliance orders in place, you really need to think about your business relationship with your Chinese counterpart, your investment in China, and find a way that to try to comply with the U.S. sanctions or compliance order. In the meantime, to try to figure out how to work with your Chinese business partner, work it out. So sorry, it's a it's a tough question. Yeah.
No, that's we completely understand. Unless there's any other questions from the audience, I'll give it another about 30 seconds here to see if anyone else has any other questions. Here we go. Perfect timing. Dr. Linus Lin asks, it seems that we are in a downward spiral. What signs, if any, do you see that this may reverse the trend? Should we anticipate a reversal at some point?
I'm pretty pessimistic at this point, unfortunately, and because if you look at the directions, I think the Chinese government it really it has made the determination it's going to be to head to a direction that it would like to move forward. And that direction would be different with that the US government and the Western world would like China to head to. So that kinds of, and more than that, and China, because of China's economic power, it really has the confidence and believed it could do that. And it really believed its direction is better than the directions of the US or the Western part of the world. And that's the system that's better for Chinese people and China. So and if you look at all those new developments in US and EU in dealing with China relationship, although President Biden said we don't want to have a Cold War, but if I'm doubtful that in the near future that would be avoided.
Well, Mr. Lee, thank you again for taking the time out of your early morning and for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks.